Debbie Fisher is right. Ms. Fisher, if you'd come to the podium, please.
Okay. All right. Great. Thank you.
Okay. Ms. Fisher, thank you for being here. If you just quickly tell us where you're from, and we're running on a tight deadline, if you could just go ahead and get to the essence of what you want this committee to know.
I will be very prompt.
Thank you.
I'm Debbie Fisher. I'm from Cobb County, Georgia. To give you a little background, I was part of the voter review panel during the general election. I've also been a monitor during the recount, the hand recount, and the recount, and I currently am also monitoring the absentee ballot processing in Cobb County at Jim Miller Park. On November 16th, during the recount, I was on the voter review panel, and I reviewed in one day 298 military ballots. Of those ballots, as I walked through them piece by piece, I noticed several things that were greatly disturbing. I noticed that they were very neatly filled out. Not that I don't expect the military to be able to color in between the lines, but they were inordinately perfect bubbles. I also noticed that there were no stray marks, there were no X's, there were no check marks. They were all perfectly filled out. On the original ballots, as we were going through them, it appeared to me that about 90% of them had no paper folds, yet I was told that in Cobb County, the military is required to mail these ballots in. One or the other wasn't possible. I also noticed that there were only 2 of the 298 that had blue ink versus black ink. Now, while that may not be unusual, it was combining all of these things that seemed very out of the ordinary. The watermarks, which were on the UACAVA ballots, as we all know, a watermark is supposed to be semi-transparent. You're supposed to be able to see through it. What I noticed on 3 separate ballots, those watermarks were solid gray. They were in front of the print, not behind it. At that point, I made a challenge. I said, I do not believe these ballots to be authentic. I was told by Janine Evler that, oh yes, we just told them to set their printers darker. These are printed off individual printers, so they're all going to be different. Well, the interesting thing is the military ballots I have witnessed over the last week that they're processing now, not one of them have solid gray watermarks. They're watermarks like this, the UACAVA watermark that goes through the ballot. So I challenged those and asked that the ballots be thrown out. She refused. She said that they were verified, that they were legitimate ballots, and they would remain. Another thing that I noticed as we were going through these ballots, and on the voter review panel, what we were doing during the recount, that we were not entitled to do when the ballots were being processed. We were looking at the original, which was a printed piece of paper that came from a normal, ordinary printer, and then we were looking at what election workers had done to create a true ballot on ballot paper. And so the defective ones we were supposed to compare to the ones that they had prepared. Of those ballots, as I am ticking off, and I'm fairly good with numbers, I estimated that somewhere between 80 and 90% were going to Joe Biden. Throughout the day, it kept making me sicker and sicker every time I saw another Biden, 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 and then I'm going through batches. 100% of the batches were Biden. I find that statistically impossible. If you look at the history of what the military ballots and how they vote, it typically is a reflection of what you'll see in the areas that you're looking in. In Cobb County, Georgia, I know we kind of went a little blue locally, but traditionally in the neighborhoods, we are very conservative. We don't vote 100% Biden. Yet these military ballots were between 80 and 90% Biden. On top of that, I looked at some of the other counties. Fulton County, interestingly enough, are the only ones that report military ballots as a separate category. 93%, I believe, is what that they tallied for Biden. Again, I find that statistically impossible. One thing that I have noticed as we went through the different processes, the recount, and now the processing again. The number of ballots that we received for the military were 826. They threw a couple out. Some were invalid signatures. Other came in past the deadlines. And some of them were thrown out for an unknown reason. The number of ballots that we actually counted were 782. The number of ballots that we recounted in the recount, not the hand recount, the machine recount, was only 1,401. Doesn't make any sense, does it? They were all done by hand. We actually had to make those ballots. 300 and some odd ballots disappeared between the 2 weeks between those counts. When I inquired from Janine Evler how we could have 1,700 and change, and then it drops 300 and some ballots, I was told, oh no, those numbers had not been they had not been adjudicated at that point, and those other ballots were actually run through the scanner. We don't separate military ballots. Yes, they do. In the recount, I looked at ballot box after ballot box of military ballots. They are separated. They are not required to be mailed in. Matter of fact, I found out about 93% of those ballots were submitted electronically, not by mail-in ballots. So that electronic thing happens to have a little bit of a problem. How do you verify a signature on an electronic and on an email? There were no emails to be attached to the original printout. So as we're monitoring, how do we know that's a real ballot? How do we know it came from a military person? There is nothing that shows, that goes with that ballot, that it was actually the person who it said it was. Those are very concerning things to me. And of all votes that should count, it should be those people who put their lives on the line so that we have the right to vote. And it makes me sick that 90-some% went Biden. I don't believe that. I can't prove it, but I don't believe it. And I ask you guys, when you're going back and you're looking at these laws, to look at how we process these military ballots, because it isn't right. Matter of fact, I had an election worker tell me, most of the time we don't even count them unless it's a really close race. They should be the first ballots counted. And with that...
Thank you, Ms. Senator Rhett, you had a quick question?
Excuse me, ma'am. How you doing today?
I'm very well, thank you.
Were you aware that Cobb County has passed several audits, including just recently a signature audit where they received a 99.99% accuracy rate?
Yes, I actually am.
Thank you.
I am aware of the press conference where we got big cred.
And were you aware that that audit was supervised by the Secretary of State in the Georgia Department, GBI?
Yes,
Okay.
I was. Matter of fact, I was present when the GBI brought back the boxes full of ballots, along with a unmarked ballot box that wasn't the envelopes. I'm guessing it was the military ballots that I complained about.
And they both certified the 99.99% accuracy rate.
They did certify with no observers available to watch how they audited them. So I'm not saying that they were right. I'm not saying that they were wrong. I'm just saying that I don't believe them any more than I believe anybody else because my lying eyes saw what they saw.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Senator Jones, did you have a question? No.
Oh, more questions?
Yeah.
One more.
What was your name
Of
again?
my lying
I'm
eyes.
sorry, I
Ms.
missed
Fisher.
your name. Ms.
Debbie,
Fisher.
after I just said that, maybe I shouldn't repeat my name, but it's Debbie
no,
Fisher.
You're fine.
Yeah.
Ms. Fisher, and everything that you witnessed, did you ever contact the Secretary of State's office directly?
3 times.
Did they respond back to you?
They thanked me for my submission.
Thank you for your submission. Really. That seems to be a common theme that we have with most everybody who's come before us today and in the past. Is
Yes.
that they've reached out to the Secretary of State's office and gotten no response. What also seems to be a common theme, Mr. Chairman, is I'm proud Cobb County was able to accomplish what they did with the 15,000 ballots that were reviewed, but the elephant in the room here is Fulton County. I mean,
Yeah.
we don't hear anything back from Secretary of State's office, and issues arrive in Fulton County. And I don't know. I know our Secretary of State's not from Georgia, but if you were born and raised in Georgia, you're familiar with Fulton County and the history of elections. Mr. Chairman, I appreciate your hard work and I appreciate your testimony.
May I make one more comment that I remembered I forgot to talk about? That was actually interesting. On Saturday at Jim Miller Park, speaking of our 99% audit on the signatures, dozens and dozens of signatures did not have the red initials that they had been actually approved before they started processing the ballots. And you all may not know the process, but what happens is the yellow outer envelope has the signature, your address, and that's what they check. When they look at it and they say, yep, that's Debbie Fisher, they put their red initials out to the side that says it's been looked at. Dozens on Saturday had no red initials. The problem is, once that is separated from that outer envelope, you got to count that ballot regardless. Okay? That's a problem. So the 99% audit that we heard about yesterday, I'm just going to say, we shouldn't have had dozens on Saturday that had not been looked at.
Thank you, Ms. Fisher. Okay, now we'll move on to Ms. Grubbs and Ms. Knox. And I think, did you have a slide presentation?
I do.
Okay, and how do we identify that?
I have given it says shred machine. I just gave it to the fellow outside.
Yeah, we have it.
Okay.